All right, here we go again. Another episode of Coffee with the Founder. Got my coffee cup, got my coffee, and of course, we got another phenomenal guest here with us, a friend, a colleague, a true brother
Nope.
at a couple of different levels. And so, Antonio, man, what we're doing, bro, is really trying to introduce our WPC family to the folks who have been a part of our network over the years, supporting us, attending, so on and so forth. And so we're glad that you can be here today. Let me start by just asking you, bro, who you are and what is your job?
So my name is Antonio Williams, and I am the Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at WIlliam Penn Charter School. WIlliam Penn Charter is located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I am not from Philly, I'm from Brooklyn. And it is the 5th oldest school in the country and the oldest Quaker school in the country.
Wow. Now, so much involved with that, independent school, it's old, and it's Quaker. So we're going to explore all of those. But first, let me ask you, how does a brother from Brooklyn get to Penn Charter? I mean, did you grow up thinking this is the job I want to do someday? How did it happen?
Man, I asked myself, so when I was in undergrad or even growing up, I love math and I teach math as well. And I was a math chair for 14 years. And when I was younger, I actually wanted to be a pilot, a fighter pilot. And I flew planes in high school. I went to college to become an engineer, aerospace engineer, with the understanding that I probably will do that. Did that for a couple of years, got laid off, and my aunt, who was a junior high school principal, said there was a math teacher available in New York City District 2, and pulled me in, and I've been teaching since. So it's over 25 years. It's crazy. It's crazy. And to get to Philly, like the head of schools, a black man, is offered me the job and, said, hey, it's my aspirations, and said, hey, I'm gonna help you get to where you need to go. So I took him up on the offer. Yeah.
Now, I'm assuming the school you worked in Brooklyn and New York is a little different than Penn Charter.
Yeah, it is.
Can you talk a little bit about just some of the differences you see in reference to some of essentially New York public school kind of education versus what you're seeing at Penn Charter?
Right. So honestly, because I went from an independent school in Brooklyn, Packer, who I had a great time and was filled with great colleagues. When I think about Packer and think about all of especially the faculty of color that have come through there or that have worked there, it is a long list of highly accomplished individuals. Some are actually head of schools and assistant head of schools and gone on to do great and powerful things within our community. So it has had a great time. It is a great school. The difference I would say between Packer and Penn Charter is there is a sort of like a spiritual component that is part of Penn Charter that Packer never had.
Okay.
So there's that underlying spiritualness that sort of guides whatever decision we try to make. So that's the main difference I would say between the two. They're both great schools for different reasons, but I think that's really the biggest difference. Okay. And I would say it's probably not, Penn Charter is not as intense as as Packer, but again, it's just that New York Philly thing.
Right. So I think what was interesting or is interesting to me is you entered right into independent school then when your auntie asked you to come teach and there was a job opening. So it was right to Packer. Now, did you go to an independent school? Is that the background that you come from?
So I actually, no. So I started in public school when I first started teaching.
Oh, you did start public school?
Okay. I did start public school. And then evolved into independent school. It's weird, like I didn't anticipate going to independent school to teach. A friend of my mother was sat on a board to another independent school and was like, hey, I want you to work here. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll go check it out and see. And I ended up in independent schools since that point. I did go to independent school when I was younger, but then I ended up going to public school. So I did both.
Gotcha. All right. So you've had a kind of
Yeah.
a broad experience in reference to education,
Yeah.
particularly
Right.
New York, Northeast. And I mean, what has that taught you, man, as you think about your life experience, public school, independent school, and then your career teaching public school, independent school, and now being an administrator, still do some, I mean, when you think about that landscape of work and your involvement, I mean, what have you learned from that?
I think the biggest thing is, man plans, God smiles at the end of the day, because, you may have all of these, thoughts and ideas and goals that you may have. And, there is another part that plays a role in this that has the final say, so to speak. And I think the bigger piece is that for me to be successful today, that all of those experiences given me insight to the different experiences that students may have. And I have the ability to sort of address all of those things and all of those avenues and all of those experiences, because I've experienced them myself, whether it's, growing up in Brooklyn and all of those experiences that come with it. And then being an independent school, being a kid from Brooklyn in an independent school. So all of those aspects, you sort of, you experience, so, and I think it gives me insight and an ability to connect with those that have that same experience, and I can say, hey, you know what, I've done that. I know this is probably what you're feeling. And I didn't have someone to actually have that conversation with, so I'm going to share my experience with you so you don't have to make the same mistakes that I made. So, so I think for me, I think that's the biggest piece, man. It's been a blessing to have those experiences, because I can share that with students that are younger so they don't make the same mistakes.
Yeah. Now I'm thinking, bro, at least in my career in teacher education and teacher preparation, I mean, a Black man teaching math, man, that's like a unicorn out there, bro. So I'm wondering, like, as you found yourself in places, I mean, doing carrying the expertise you have, doing the job you've been doing, which is often not something students and even families face, with a Black man teaching the subject matter and now even administrating. What has been some of the challenges you face in reference to Black male educator, leader across your career?
It's one of those where you're always being challenged, right? I remember being at an independent school, and I remember doing a back to school night, when parents come in and see the teacher and get introduced to the teacher. You do a little split, a demo, whatever. And I remember doing this demo, and I remember there was a white gentleman in the back corner of the room, and I can still see it. And he asked a question, but it was clearly a question that he was challenging me and questioning my intelligence. So I remember saying to myself, do I completely embarrass this person and do it in a very Brooklyn wild way, or just embarrass him, but say it in such a way that he gets it? So I went the more intelligent way, in the sense where I did it. And I remember doing it, and I remember a couple other white parents that were sitting in front, they just shook their head like, good, you got it. So, so it was definitely, it's always being challenged. And even, as an administrator, man, it's, we're held to a different standard. And we have to, we can't just we have to be twice as better as everyone else to be recognized. It comes with tremendous, pressure and all of those things, but we know that that's the case. And at this point in my life, I'm like, yeah, I know that's what it is. I, on some level, have accepted that. So now I just got to blow the doors off type thing.
Yeah. Now, what I know about you too, man, is you stay true to you, which is not always easy to do, because you take that example you just brought forth, right? Like,
Right.
I don't know, is that code switching, or as my friend Russell Marsh put it,
Yo,
that's
yeah.
paycheck voice, right? Like, just talk to me a little bit about the toll it takes, man, when you're trying to,
Man.
maintain the excellence that you possess, but sometimes you're facing challenges, misconceptions, microaggressions, stereotypes. I mean, all the things that come with that. And as you mentioned, parents, students, possibly colleagues as well. So
Yeah,
talk a little bit about the challenges associated with keeping it real, and how you take care of yourself, bro.
Yo, it's crazy, right? Because that's real. Like, and I think, in my 20s, I definitely felt that pressure to sort of adapt, and hide myself, my true self. To even, I would say, even going into my 30s, that I know I look like I'm 15, but it's all good. But it's like one of those things where I know that it came with maturity, like, and came with a lot of heartache. And I realized that if I can't look in the mirror and appreciate who I am, like, whatever the outcome is going to be, if I'm true to myself, then I'm okay with whatever the outcome is going to be, right? Because as soon as I change myself and the outcome is this, then I'm upset with myself, right? I'm not upset with you, I'm upset with myself. And that's a heavier toll to carry, than being upset with it not working out the way you would want it to work out. So I've kind of learned that over time. And I think, my parents definitely, remind me, like, just be you. Like, and if that's not good enough, then that's not good enough. Or better yet, it just wasn't meant for you. And your day will come at another place. So I kind of remind myself of that, and, and keep my eyes sort of on the prize and keep working and striving towards, my ultimate goal. But, I can't worry about, what other people think. I can't worry about what other people feel to some extent, because, I know there are times, like, so, as a Black man, like, you get angry about something, so you got to mask that to some extent, right? And you go home with that anger, right? But meanwhile, our colleagues that look like a different complexion get to express that anger or that frustration. When we do it, it becomes like, well, he's just angry all the time. And you're like, no, I'm angry because you did something stupid, right? So I have to correct you. But how I do it, will sort of, dictate how you perceive me to be, right? So so all of those things that, I think about, and try to address, and remind myself, like, just be true to myself. I'm able to sort of articulate things in a way where, you're not focused on how I'm saying it, but what I'm saying.
Yeah, yeah. I wonder, I mean, as you mentioned, parent night,
Mhm.
part of, being at the independent school level, you're recruiting, you're outreaching. I mean, teachers, faculty, staff, students. I'm the father of a Black male,
Mhm.
thinking about ninth grade or middle school there, Penn Charter. I mean, why would I send my kid to a school that doesn't seem in its original design to be for them?
Right.
What
Right.
are the things that you say to parents, to students, to say that this is a place where you can not only survive, but thrive?
So it's, I don't say that to everyone, right? Because it's not, definitely not for every person. And I think, we as parents, need to think about that. Sometimes we get caught up with the name of the school and think, oh, well, my child goes to that school, they're guaranteed this particular experience. And the reality is that, no, you want to find a school that actually fits your child, and your child can thrive. I think in terms of the conversations that I have with parents, I really speak from the perspective of who I am as a person, right? And that, if you're here, and I know your child and I have a relationship with your child, I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that nothing gets in their way And if there is something that gets in there where I'm going to help them deal with it, but also inform you in terms of like what needs to be done to get their child through that. For example, like I had a conversation about a 45-minute conversation just yesterday with a Black mom, talking to her about her daughter who's in 11th grade. And, she's a lifer. She was diagnosed with, ADHD and depression. And the mother didn't want to put her on medication for a variety of different reasons. And we kind of, I spent 45 minutes talking through all of those issues that she may have around, medication and her anxiety around that. And eventually got her to the point where, she's like, okay, I'm going to at least give the medication an opportunity to work, and we're going to try it. So, those are the examples that I try to give, or something as simple as like, what, I drove 2 students on a college tour in DC and Maryland, right? Because they didn't have the money to go to travel. Another teacher paid, when we had PLCC in Atlanta, we paid for a student, or she paid for the student to go down to visit Morehouse, and I gave him my room so he can stay, so he can visit the school, right? So these are the things that, we do as teachers or faculty or administrators of color. Then in terms of our students, we go the extra mile to try to make sure that, they're good. So those are the things that I try to tell parents, to let them know that when they come, we got you.
Yeah. So that extra mile is for real.
Yeah.
Talk to me about power, privilege. I mean, when I think about the independent school, and as you mentioned, the 5th oldest in the nation.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know how to ask the question. I mean, does it show up? I mean, do you deal with it? Do you teach about it? Do you challenge it? Just give me a sense of how power, privilege, white supremacy, some of those words that we see and hear out there that folks are feeling now we need to have some conversations about play out there at Penn Charter, right, from your vantage point.
Man, I mean, it's bananas in terms of the power and privilege, right? And I think it's so subtle that it's you just sort of accept it to some extent. And I'm thinking in terms of, and I don't want to say just Penn Charter, I'm gonna just say independent schools in totality, right? And the higher you go, and you think being the head of school is actually the end all be all, and you have the ultimate power, and you realize as you get closer and closer to that role, you realize that you don't really have that much power, right? It is a whole different group of individuals that actually have the power and the privilege, right? When you have, it comes out in so many different ways, whether it's you're dealing with, a disciplinary issue, you're dealing with admissions, you're dealing with, fundraising. I mean, it plays itself out in every particular way. It plays itself out when you're dealing with, when it comes to, promotions, or a situation where you have, you're hiring. It plays itself out in that situation, and it's so subtle, and you have to remind people of that. Like, I'm trying to think of, there's an example, and I'm trying to think of it, where I had to remind people that's just privilege. That's not anything else other than that. And I'm trying to remember the example, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it plays itself out in so many ways, and that you have to constantly remind people of it. Yeah. You have to constantly remind people, that you're making a decision from a privileged perspective. So, for example, when we were doing, where everyone is doing distant learning, right? And, one of the things that we talked about, or that was stated, was that they wanted students to go to a specific place in the house, sit down, and it's quiet. And I'm like, you're coming from a privileged perspective. Not everyone has that opportunity. And for some people, their bed or the corner of their room on the bed is their spot. So you can't expect students to just get up and walk out of their room and think that it's everything is peachy keen and they have a quiet place. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah, that's a great example. Especially in light of COVID-19, right. I was wondering as you were talking, because I remember being in the independent school world and facing some of those challenges that you mentioned around, just the power and privilege everywhere, and the sometimes blatant, visible, sometimes, many times, the quiet
Right.
and subtle, subliminal kind of messages.
Yep.
But what I was also wondering is, what are the perks? What are some of the benefits? I mean, what are some of the things that you've seen that you've been able to experience and somewhat capitalize? Because having privilege is not always a bad thing if you can do some good things with it.
Right.
So wondering, like, what are some of the positives? And are you seeing, because I think one of my greatest questions for the independent school world is, are you producing kids from that level that are going to change the world? Because if anybody can do it, it's those schools. So what's your sense of the perks of privilege and power there? And then how you feel about the students that you're producing into the 21st century?
So well, I'll give you a quick perk, just because I'll stay on the distance learning piece. Most of our students have laptops, starting from like fourth grade, actually. They all going all the way up have a laptop. So the distance learning is easy, right? So if you think about a public school kid that, distance learning, like, I don't have a laptop, how is that supposed to happen, right? So we have that, and, we have the ability, if you can't pay for your internet, we have the opportunity we could actually pay for it, right? So that's a huge privilege from that perspective. So it definitely has its perks, or has its perks when, if you want to go to grad school, and they say, okay, well, I can spot you money for this number of years. Like, not everyone's going to do that, right? So it has its perks, or perks from, there may be someone, a graduate of the school that works at this particular place. Like, all right, well, hey, let me hook you up. So these are the things that I try to remind our students of color, especially when they graduate, because, they're so, as they leave and they don't want to come back.
Right.
And I get the reason, but you went through all that just to have that degree. Now take the perks of that degree. Right? Use those networks to better yourself and move yourself because you made all those sacrifices to be able to do that, right? As far as the students, man, it so depends on the school. So I'll take, Penn Charter, because we try to, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and social justice is a part of who we are, right? As a Quaker institution, that is ingrained in the things that we do. The problem is that you have students that come in that are sort of not necessarily confused, but they have a decision to make, right? So they could very well come from a family that is racist, or look at things in a very myopic view, and without necessarily taking other things and other people in consideration. So when they come to Penn Charter, then, or another independent school, that same mentality, they end up looking at it like, well, am I supposed to go down this path, or am I supposed to go down that path, right? And what I try to do is to provide them with the information. So I'm not preaching, I'm just providing you with the information, and I have faith in you that you're going to make the right decision, right? And that, more importantly, you're going to be empowered to encourage someone else to make that decision, right? And be able to stand up and say, hey, even with your parents or with your dad. So I can think of a white girl that is graduating this year, where her dad is a cop, a Philly cop. Her dad's friends are cops, her uncles are cops. And she's like, Mr. Williams, I've heard them say the N-word. And she's got to the point now where she is comfortable, because she took a course called American Studies that Lee and Shahida taught, where she's comfortable and empowered enough to stand up to her father and her uncles and his friends in terms of when they say something racist. Yeah. So it can happen, right? But it takes a certain amount of courage from that child, not even from us, but it takes courage from that child. And we have to figure out a way to empower that courage, and to give them the confidence to actually do that work.
Yeah, that's good to hear, man. I mean, I know it's hard to get every student, but to know that there are some folks who are making that effort is really important. I think, especially at that level. You had mentioned some distance learning, which brings us to this, COVID-19 pandemic. First, how are you doing, bro? How's the family doing? We're working on the 40s. I don't even know what day of the 40s, but it's 40 something.
I know.
So I'm wondering, like, how are you doing? But also from the students there at Penn Charter, the community you live in. I mean, what's your sense of how folks around you are doing as well?
I think we're all feeling it, man. I think, I think when we started this whole process, I think the one thing that we did, how we started it and how we announced it was incorrect, right? We said social distancing, and the reality is that we're physically distancing, right? Which is a distinct difference in the two. And I think for hearing that subconsciously, hearing like, oh, social distancing, like we are tied away from everyone socially, so it takes a toll, and we're humans. Like we need that social interaction, how great or how small, we need that social interaction. So, for me, that's why like D Nice, spinning on Instagram and all the other DJs, like we all gravitate to it because we're all there in that room. We may not see each other physically, but we're interacting with each other in whatever way. So I think that was a piece. I mean, as I say, I'm from New York, so I have family up there, and New York is the epicenter here in this country. So it's frustrating because I can't, you can't do anything, right? You can't, my mom is there, my sister, everyone's there, so it's hard to kind of say, okay, I just have to sit back here and just wait. And God forbid, knock on wood, anyone gets sick, I still can't do anything.
Yeah.
Right. So that's the frustrating part. But then, I try to, myself and my coordinators, we try to think about different ways we can help the community interact with one another, and bond in some way, and find different things in terms of like, we're having conversations yesterday about, having a Zoom webinar around finance, right? Because I'm sure we have tons of families that have lost their job and wondering how they're going to make ends meet. So, let's provide them a resource that they could use to sort of help them and guide them through this process, but really doing it in, we said a webinar simply because we don't want families to feel like they have to reveal themselves, but they can participate anonymously. And then the person that's given the information is the only person that will see the names of the family. So thinking about that way, thinking about, having sort of like a offering, like different offering, but suggesting different movies, for lower, middle, and upper schools, each division, and then around DEI and social justice, but then giving them like guiding questions for the families to engage in, but also giving them an opportunity to say, okay, on this day, we're all going to come together and have a conversation about this movie and just share and really include the parents, not just the students, but the parents and the families. And we just come together and just have a conversation, but just trying to think differently. And I think that's a piece that we, in education, there's a piece that I keep stressing to other administrators is that we're in a unique position that we're really reevaluating who we are as an institution, reevaluating who we are as a person, and reevaluating our own position. And if we don't do that, then we're going to be left out in the cold once we go through this process.
Yeah. A couple more things, man. One, what has this pandemic taught you about you and the world we're living in? I mean, we've essentially been forced to pause and reflect. So, right. I mean, what has this time taught you about you? What are some of those reflections you're doing? And then also, just as you think about America today, what's your sense of what this has taught you about the nation we're living in right now?
Man, the nation, the world, first, I feel like we're lost. You know what I mean? I feel like there's I shouldn't say not all of us. I think there's some of us that are truly lost and really trying to figure out where to go. Like, I really believe that. And I mean lost, like when I think about all of these protests that are going out, that are happening right now, I get it from the perspective that you're angry and you're upset and frustrated that you've lost your job, you're losing money. And, I'm blessed to still have my job, still have an income. But the reality is that if you're dead, you can't recoup any of that. So, you know, to think that you can just protest and you don't believe it, right? When you have all of these people dying across the entire world from this particular virus, why don't you believe it? You know, and it's like, there's a level of selfishness that is unreal, that is bothersome, right? And that's the part that I really believe that we're in a sort of a fork in the road, and we all have a personal decision to make are in that fork. You know, whether you're going to go this way and go that way, and there's a divide, and I'm not sure how you're going to bridge those two back together again, because I think those that go this way away from it, I think they're going to have to figure that out on their own. And no matter what you and I may say, it's like they have to figure that. It's almost like a spiritual component that they have to figure out about themselves, about, hey, I need to move over here.
Yeah. Now, let me ask you about the next 10 years. I mean, you had mentioned head of school. I don't know if that's in your future, but when you think about Brother Williams over the next 10 years, what are some goals? What you got cooking? What you thinking about?
I mean, definitely, you know, head of school is in my sights, and making that happen. But also thinking about what type of school I want to lead, and what that would look like, and really thinking about what type of leader that I want to be once I enter that role. There was a head of school that told me a couple of years ago when we were talking, and I told him that I was like, I want your seat. And he laughed at me. He was like, you'll get it. He said, but you know, what I want you to do between now and then is just think about the type of leader you want to be and acquire all those skills that you need to have to be that leader. Yeah. And I thought that was great advice. And I pay attention, you know, not just to my head of school, but a variety of different heads of schools that I, you know, highly respect, and those that I don't respect, because, you know, you still can learn from them as well, in terms of the don'ts. So I think those are the things that, you know, I think about. You know, I'm hoping that even, you know, once I've gotten to that place in terms of head of school, and then what comes after that, my hope is to be part of something like, you know, Prep for Prep, Stepping Stone, you know, Seed, ABC, where now my focus is on a totally different demographic as opposed to the demographic that I'm currently in. Not to say I'm complaining about it, but it's a different focus at that point.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you lastly, to end in a fun way. You had mentioned some movies you're suggesting and things y'all are working with families around. Is there anything you've watched or anything you've listened to, music, albums, or anything you've read or reading that you would suggest? We're trying to create a little what to do over quarantine list for folks. Anything you recommend for our list?
So I'm in the midst of reading. I just started reading 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. So that's, I would say I would read that one. Music wise, man, I listen to, you know, D Nice, Tony Touch, you know, DJ Scratch. There's so many, DJ Premier, DJ Moss, who's a new actually. So, you know, those are the things that, and I do my virtual happy hours, my friends and frat. So, you know, I definitely appreciate that. And then, you know, I used to DJ when I was younger, all through college and post-college. So I ended up buying myself a little DJ thing here. So I'm gonna come out of retirement, man. Be like Jordan.
Get off the dust.
Yeah, man.
Man, that's good to hear, man. That's good to hear.
My daughter looked at me like, really, Dad? Like, yeah.
Well, I'm gonna close out, man, giving you a little love, man, because you know, every now and then I gotta.
I appreciate you, dude. I appreciate you. Yeah, I got my cup. You see me?
Yeah, I see you, man. I just want to thank you, man, for joining Coffee with the Founder, man, sharing about your work and your life, man. And I know you're doing some great stuff, not by what you say, man, but you know, by just what I see and what I know from the folks who talk about you, man. And I appreciate you coming on to share that. And I just appreciate you as a brother, always supporting me, man. Since we connected,
definitely,
you always supported me in my work, man. So thank you, bro.
Yeah, appreciate you, man. Appreciate you. Keep doing what you're doing, Nuke.
I will, man. Fine, take care, man.
Yo, and real talk, man. Like I always remember that N-word presentation, man, and how powerful that was. And I remember, more importantly, there was a gentleman there that his name was Bobby. And I remember when you did that close the door piece, and I remember him saying, he said it to you, and he was like, I see myself. And I always remember that, man.
Yeah.
I always remember that. But it was powerful, bro. I love you, man. Yo.
Much love, bro. Yo, man. Appreciate you.
Be safe, bro.